When responding to standard events with jQuery code, many developers make use of the shorthand methods that attach event handlers to elements. The shorthand methods that are currently defined within jQuery are listed here. The name indicates the event type that is being handled. Each method accepts a handler function as a parameter. It is very easy to make use of these methods. Let's take a look at some code. We're going to use a simple HTML page to demonstrate event handling. Within the head tag, we reference jQuery as well as a style sheet. We'll look at the style sheet in a moment. There are two div tags within this page. The first one is our work area. We'll place the controls that we want to bind events to in this div. For now, all we have is a simple button that says, "Click me." It also has a class of clickable. We'll get into that in a moment too. Notice that we place a heading tag within each div to give a visual indication of what they are used for. We'll also separate the heading from the rest of the content with a horizontal rule, a line. The second div is just a message area that can be used to display messages from within our scripts. Instead of popping up a bunch of alert dialog boxes or making use of the debugging console, we'll place any notifications we want to see in the messages div. We're starting with an empty document ready function, and we're using the shorthand method for document ready. Let's take a look at the CSS file that is referenced by this page. The work area and messages divs are positioned absolutely on the page, side by side. We add a gradient background and a solid border to each. After setting the size of the div, we make sure to set the overflow Y to auto. This will give us a scroll bar if we end up with more content than will fit within the div. Notice the clickable class. For now, we're just changing the cursor to the hand pointer to give an indication that the element can be clicked when the cursor moves over it. We also provide a background color for a highlight class. This will allow us to highlight elements easily to make them more visible as we interact with them. Finally, we set up some custom margins for our heading 5 tag to use less screen space than it does by default. If we load this page in a browser right now, we'll see the divs and the input button, but nothing will happen if we click on the button. Let's go ahead and add a click handler to make the page interactive, then we'll take a look at how the page renders. The input button doesn't have an ID that we can use as a jQuery selector. It does have the clickable class though. We'll use that class to select it for now. There are numerous ways we could have selected the input button. What we really want though is any element that has the clickable class. By using this selector, we can expand the elements that will respond to this event handler just by adding the clickable class to anything we wish to be clickable. For now, all we're doing is appending some text to the messages div followed by a break. This will make sure we start subsequent messages on a new line. Let's take a look at how this works, then we'll come back and talk about it some more. We get our two divs side by side and a nice header in each. When the input button is clicked, a message is added that indicates the click was processed. jQuery is giving us a great deal of power with just a couple of lines of code. The selector for the class of clickable will return all elements on the page that have a clickable class. Currently, we only have one element that matches that selector. For each element in the selector list, an event handler is attached that will be triggered upon the associated event, in this case, the click. The event handler we're defining is an anonymous function. This is the most common manner in which events are processed within jQuery pages. Notice how the click event handler is defined within the document ready function. This is necessary because the way we're writing this code, we expect the element or elements associated with the clickable class to already be present in the DOM. If we try to attach an event handler when the element doesn't exist, we won't get an error, but we won't get any click responses either. This is such an obvious facet of event handling, but it's easy to fall victim to this. Even the most experienced JavaScript and jQuery programmers find themselves debugging events that aren't fired for elements that weren't available at the time of assigning event handlers. Usually, it's because content hasn't been loaded through a dynamic process, or they run some function prior to the document being ready. Let's verify that we can listen for clicks on multiple elements by adding the clickable class to one more tag. In this case, let's add the clickable class to the work area heading. It may not be practical to have a clickable header, but we're just trying to illustrate a point. Let's run this in Firefox and see the results. As we can see, we get a hand pointer as we move the mouse across the header. When we click it, a message that a click has occurred is displayed. We're getting a click message for each element that has the clickable class, but there's no visible difference in the output. We've seen the shorthand method for the click event handler. The syntax for each of the other shorthand methods is the same. We will make use of some of the others later on. Although this list is quite comprehensive, there are still some events that do not have a shorthand method associated with them. Touch, drag, drop, resize, scroll, and move events may be triggered by some browsers, but there are no shorthand methods for them. There is an alternate syntax that will handle any event triggered by the system, including custom ones we can make up. We'll look at that later.